Hey everybody, and welcome to Andrelczyk Amusement Academy. Today we are episode number 22. First of all, happy Halloween to everyone out there. Hope you're doing something fun tonight. And welcome in for our distinctly not Halloween related episode. So we're changing things up a little bit, but if this is your first time seeing our stream or the replay here later on YouTube, welcome. This is Andrelczyk Amusement Academy. This is essentially a realism tutorial channel where I am going to teach you how to build realism in RCT2. So I am a real life theme park designer, and I like doing this sort of thing in RCT, so I'm trying to bring my knowledge from that to here and kind of show you how to build. Oh, welcome in, Marcel. Thank you for stopping by. Hope you're doing all right today. So today we are looking at a little bit different of a theme or at least a setup. We usually pick 9 coasters of a related theme and try and build them, but I got asked to do a little bit more than just coasters. So talking infrastructure, transfer tracks, catwalks, maybe supports, pathways, stations, things like that. So we're going to expand ourselves by contracting the amount of coasters that we're building. So we're going to actually build a little park, and this will be the first kind of mini park on the series, I guess. But we're gonna give this a try. But no worries. Enjoy your short time here, and enjoy your stream here later on. And maybe I'll catch you here when I'm done. I'm gonna be a little shorter today. We've been good. We've been good. So I'm excited to do this this one just because it's a little bit different. So anyway, let's jump on in and see how we want to get this going. So we got asked on our Discord channel, which is still relatively new. If you haven't joined it, feel free to check the description below or my profile there where you can find a link to it. We got asked to basically design out how to build a park, or how I at least go about building a new park, and how you select the coasters for it, how we do all those sorts of things as you get started. But first of all, I started on my own workbench that I like to use, so I have all my scenery pieces. So right now I'm using the Extreme 97 2021 workbench. I like my custom scenery, and I pretty much use that exclusively. If you're into no custom scenery, there's plenty of workbenches out there for that too. But this is my thing, so I enjoy using all these pieces. But this is not a be-all, end-all. You can always swap scenery here in the object selection and swap out to your liking, which I'm sure we'll be doing quite a bit as we go through this park. I've also gone ahead and made the map the full size. Typically we don't do this, but yeah, I'll start a little bit smaller, but we'll see where this goes, and it gives us a palette to kind of screw around on some other stuff. Isn't an NCSO workbench just a selection of themes? Yeah, more or less. I guess so. It's honestly been a little while since I've made one of those, but yeah, it's just kind of selecting the standard themes from the game if you're into NCSO. Which, you know, there's some pretty cool stuff out there right now that people are doing on with no custom scenery. We've reviewed a few on our YouTube channel, so definitely if you're interested in more vanilla type play, definitely check that out. Okay, so the question being here is how do we start a park? And we're gonna go for sort of a medium-sized park because I don't want to go too large here early on. But first things first, I want to raise up our land. So we see we only have about this much space here on this workbench at the time, and I like to have a little bit more underground for 2 reasons. For one, I like to do shoestring flat rides, and the more underground space you have, the easier it is to play with. And 2, I just like having the ability to either go down into valleys or up into mountains, kind of whichever way we feel like going. So we don't want to limit ourselves to whatever options we've got. So we're gonna max out here at 64. And let's take a look. All right. I'm going to go up about double what we are before. Actually, we may not need that far. Let's go. Well, maybe let's do that anyway. Yeah, I don't. I find that I've kind of screwed myself up like that before, and it's one of those things that I try to remember now. If I don't do it, then I know I'm going to be hurting later. So we're just going to bring the whole thing up. Now, for a landscape itself, if you want to do mountains, valleys, all that sort of thing, you can do the height map generator, which is actually super, super cool and generates a pretty neat landscape. Marcel, I think I saw you using that last week on your stream, building that your little park that you had started. And it's a really cool way to generate a landscape very quickly. Personally, it's not my favorite because I'm going to generally craft my landscape kind of as we go. But for somebody that wants to just jump right in, get going, and have a landscape to work with from the outset, it's a really great option and really cool to use. So that's one way to go about it. All right. So I do have my usual couple of starters here. Usually this is 9, and this is not to say that these are the 9 we're going to build, but I picked kind of 4 main coasters and a kids coaster for our lineup here. But we're probably going to end up changing a couple of these kind of based on what we decide to do here. So I have a wooden coaster, I have a mine train, I have a Vekoma flying coaster, I have a B&M stand-up coaster, and then an ENF Miler kids coaster. A little bit different than usual, perhaps, and some kind of oddball rides, but for me, I find that the more kind of out there rides are the more interesting ones, like bobsleds or powered coasters, even though it's not a powered coaster, or even though it's not a coaster, but things like that that are a little bit more strange, you don't see quite as often, and things like that. So I tend to kind of gravitate towards those rides as we build. But that's not to say that we have to go in one way or another. When we start thinking about an overall park, you have to ask yourself a couple of different things. First of all, kind of where is it set? And what did you say, Zara? And welcome in, Zara. I should have been 4 B&M sit downs, and particularly my B&M sit down. Just 5 B&M sit downs. It's fine. It's like a Universal Park or something, which is going to afford a lot of big coasters. Typically, I don't even do B&M coasters if I can avoid it. A lot of my larger releases lately had not had any, just because I like the other kind of unique rides. But anyway, welcome in. How are you doing? So the first kind of thought is, where is it located? Is it Europe? Is it Asia? Is it North America, South America, Africa, wherever it may be? And some of that, depending on how realistic you want to go, can actually make a fair bit of difference as far as what ride you choose. So you look into park history and ride history and things like that. And again, like I said, this is kind of going kind of far down the rabbit hole of realism, but you want to look into your fake park history that you're creating here and try and build something that's going to match the development of the park. So you don't want to have a park that all of a sudden got 5 or 6 coasters in the first 6 years of their park or something like that, because it's just not necessarily how a park is typically going to work. They're going to have to start slow and build up and get capital to improve things, to build new rides, to go from where they are to here. Certainly a little bit of fluff now and then to really add what you want, but it's still something that we'll kind of look at. So park layout wise, you also have to look at, is this a planned park? So are we going to say take the Disney approach where you have an entrance, you have a main street, you have a hub, and then you have lands that go out from that area, and then generally they all connect around. This is called the hub and spoke approach. So that's one way to go about doing a park. That's really if you're planning from the outset where the whole park got built all at once. If it did, then cool, but we're not going to go that way typically. The other option is, well, there's a couple of different options. So a lot of times I like to build around a central feature, so a lake or something like that. And it doesn't have to be so rigid that you have basically a circular oval lake and then you have stuff around it. We can kind of build a little bit of just a little bit of kind of landscape into our thing. So let's say we kind of have this sort of like kidney bean shaped lake, and then you have a go down to 2 here. And land tiles are the land marking is absolutely your friend. Do this sort of thing for all of your markups as far as I'm concerned. And then we have some kind of a lakeside feature here, and then we'll kind of say we'll slope up on a couple of the sides and kind of create this lake in a valley. The kind of key thing to remember is that typically your water is going to be at the bottom. Granted, you can have landscape that goes down around it, but you want to be pretty cautious about how you do that. So typically your water is going to be at your low point, and then your landscape kind of slopes up from it. Think about your runoff from your mountains and landscape goes somewhere, and typically it's going to go into the body of water, so it's going to go into that lake. I don't really build entrances right away. Actually, your entrances are one of the last things that I typically build. I usually kind of know whereabouts it's going to go, but I don't like to build them until the very, very end. And that's just a me thing. I don't like committing myself to a certain architectural style or scale early on. I like to let my park flow a little bit and kind of decide where I want to go with it. And then once I get to that point, then and I have something established to say it's a certain size, it's a certain scale, whatever it may be, then I'll go in there and build my entrance kind of midway through my park build itself. All right, but let's put in a coaster because I always start with a coaster. Every one of my successful parks, I started with a roller coaster. So we're going to check out our CDB here and see what's going on. There's a new one added today. Let's see what we got. Gold mine coaster from Technical Park. Interesting, interesting front cover there. A little much. That kind of looks like a nice layout, though. Not for us, right this instant. I think we want to go back a little bit. I think I want a park that started in, we'll call it the maybe 80s or so. And there's no reason that a park couldn't have gone without a coaster for quite some time. But we want to look at, wooden coasters. So let's look at, say, something by Din Corporation. So Din was building wooden coasters from 83 to 92. And this is how I usually start, is by looking at different coasters out there, seeing what's around, what's a good option. So I think we want sort of we'll call it a chunky wooden coaster to kind of sit on the side and be one of our earlier rides. Timberwolf is a good example, as a pretty sizable footprint. Not something too exciting, not something too difficult to do, but it's a pretty big ride. Here's a good shot of the layout with the sort of T-shaped layout almost, where you have the lift hill, 90-degree turn, sort of an oval here. You have another helix on the far end, and then back to your brakes. You can kind of see the early CCI inspiration here. This helix has since been removed, actually. Now GCI came in the other year and did this like overbanked corner thing. So it's a little sad to see that go because it's a classic sort of element, but progress and maintenance and things like that, you got to understand is going to happen. So that's an option. If anybody has any suggestions too of coasters that might be a good option, let me know and we'll take a look. We could kind of go with the standard sort of double out and back type layout. Predator is a good example of that here at Darien Lake. I'm certainly not opposed to something like an early CCI coaster too. So I think of something like the Raven at Holiday World, where we're using the terrain, and it's a pretty small coaster, 80 feet, 85-foot drop, and only about 2,800 feet. But this is what put Holiday World on the map. I kind of think of our park here that we're looking at least from a size and scale standpoint, sort of like a Holiday World, where it's relatively small but built up over time. Um, there's I actually really like Raven, and this is might be what we go after a little bit. Let's take a look. We actually just have a pretty new a new one here from Coaster Force. They've been posting a couple videos here lately. Let's take a ride on Raven. Holiday World is in the process of retracking this. They did a pretty substantial renovation here just recently over the off season, and it looks really nice. So I'm looking forward to whenever I can get back up there and ride it again. Hey, Things on Tracks, welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. How are you today? This fine Halloween day. Which, by the way, we will have a shorter stream today because of Halloween. I gotta get set for giving candy out to the kiddos, so we're gonna do all that. But oh, no worries. You haven't actually missed much. We haven't built anything yet. I've just been kind of rambling a little bit about how I go about building a park. Welcome in. It hurts when I eat. How are you as well? So we're watching a video of Raven because I think I'd like to base our first coaster off of this. Kind of very charming old school type attraction, even though it is relatively newer, 1995. You'll notice the lack of banking kind of on that first turn. A little bit lower banking here. This is actually a section they just retracked here. Then it comes back up. We're going to parallel the first section here and split off again. Real big drop. This is one of the larger drops, but it's right in the middle of the ride too. Then we're back into the woods. And kind of rolling through the terrain here. Now, I guess it depends how much terrain we want to go into. We don't have to do a ton, but we can do a little bit, perhaps. And then there's our brakes, and back into the station. So let's hang on to that for a minute, and we can kind of decide if we want to go that direction. Let's go back to the game. All right. I'm actually gonna let this go and then kind of figure that out in a little bit. All right. So when you start a park, I pay very little attention to where the actual entrance is in relation to where our park is. That will happen later. That's all mechanics and of the game and things like that that you really don't have to worry about until much, much later, in my opinion. This is the time for us to just build an interesting ride and kind of let it go from there. All right. So we are gonna call it 4 high. We can change that a little bit later if we want. And let's also grab our PTC trains. CCI coasters early on used either Philadelphia Toboggan Company trains or Gerstlauer trains. The Gerstlauer trains are fine. We can use those. I just don't like them. They weren't very comfortable in real life, so we're going to give the PTC trains a go. Our things, not too bad. Not too bad. So we're just trying to get a park layout going here so we can kind of start. So let's look at some options for how we want to build this. So coming out of the station, I'm going to drop it just slightly to give it some speed, but then we're going to run it through our maintenance shed. So some of the early CCIs had maintenance on the front side of the station, which is totally fine. And we're going to put that right here. And then we'll drop again, turn and drop again. to get ourselves going out of the station. Now, at the same time, we're going to back up out of the station, put a brake run. So my standard brake run message, as I always have, is if we're running 2 trains, we want at least the amount of space for a brake run and the station. We have a 5-tile station, so we want 5 more tiles here worth of brakes, and we want another 5 more tiles after that for the kind of slow down portion of the brakes is what we'll call that. So let's start there. Okay, now we can go underneath of the brake run here, and then we're gonna do a lift hill. Question is, do we want to go with a diagonal lift hill or not? Challenge with diagonal lift hills is that they always end up being really stretched and really, really long. So could be a less good choice, just kind of based on our drop height. Because if we're turning off of this, we want to have it maybe a 2-tile or a 2 steep drop, so right to there. So we can come back a little bit, but you end up with sort of an oddball looking thing. So we're not going to do that. We're going to do on the grid. Okay. And notice how much less room that takes up now that we're going this way versus diagonally. And now when I put down a station, I'm going to kind of mark out these things that I'm doing here. So we've marked out a section for a transfer track. We've marked out a section for a station. Now my basic station level is going to be 3 across by however long your station is. That's not to say that needs to be what your station size is. You ought to be bigger. It should be bigger. But we don't quite know how it's going to lay out just yet. But we at least know that's a minimum. So that's kind of what we'll call our minimum requirements for this station. Okay. So let's go one more here. And so we're at 130 feet and 55. So that's probably a decent start. We're going to actually go in this direction, and we're going to drop diagonally to start. And I'm going to drop a couple of straight sections in there because I want to put a tunnel in it. Okay. When you're on the diagonal, you don't really need to extend your hills like we're doing here. Here, for example, with the little section here. Because the diagonal is kind of already stretched to fit the grid properly, it already looks pretty okay. But you don't really want to get into that on the diagonal, but you do want to do it on the grid. So we're gonna follow those guidelines. Now, at the same time, we're also going to start running our ghost train here, just to follow a little more along how we do our pacing and everything else. So first things first, we got our drop, we got our transfer track, we've got our kind of turn and lift. We'll put some brakes in here. They'll be sort of dummy brakes, although we can slow it down a little bit. It doesn't really matter at that point. Okay, let's see how we do around this. Since we're building a CCI, we need to remember that we underbank everything. CCI was very well known for underbanking their rides. That actually runs pretty well right through there. And runs that kind of nicely throughout that space. Okay. So now we're going to come up, and we want to turn this around somewhere down here. So my thought right now is that I'm kind of liking this as a plaza that we're creating. So we're sort of wrapping that plaza with the coaster. So my thoughts are we want this nice drop to be visible, um, and we want kind of something going on here. And maybe our lake edge is sort of kind of doing this. And then that way we have a kind of lake side edge here. We have this as sort of our entry and exit, or wrapping around there. Then you can put in queue space here, exit space there. And then we set it up nicely. So in general, the way that you're going to do pathways and things like that is you want to try and frame it very nicely. So you'll see in this case, we created sort of one side, two and a half maybe sides here. And we created this nice little concave space that we can nestle in some pathway. We can put some rides here. We can put some other stuff. We can do all sorts of different things in there. So we got a lot of space to play with, and we're not setting any of this in stone. We're just saying this is a possibility. This is a good way that we can start. Hey, Soap, welcome in. Welcome in. How are you today? We are in the process of building a nice little wooden coaster for our little mini park here to get started. We're also going to start with some terrain. Subtle at best. You'll notice I'm not using the mountain tool. I don't like using the mountain tool. I think it ends up making your landscape look pretty artificial. It certainly isn't going to guarantee that it goes that way, but it doesn't necessarily help it in my opinion. Well done. How's the Minecraft? Doing more coasters in there? I'm doing well. We're changing the format so far, and I think it's kind of nice to not necessarily have the pressure of getting 9 decently shaped coasters built in a short amount of time. So I will take it as far as that goes. All right. So we're trying to figure out what the best way is to mark up this corner here. So ideally, this sort of comes down and skims, whether it's a lake or whether it's, I don't necessarily know what it's going to be. One of the things, we're going to actually jump back here for a second. Let's go back to Raven here and let's look at the map. You can kind of see how Raven lays out as far as this goes. It's not a terribly long coaster, so you'll notice we have the lift hill, curve, the hill here, and then it kind of led right into this turnaround, turn back, and then we had that big drop there in the middle, if you remember, and then a couple of nice twists in the woods back to the the shed and the station. One of the things that's kind of nice with Holiday World is that this coaster is right here at the entrance. This was their first big coaster, and it makes sense that they would put it right here because when you're coming into the entrance, you get this like fantastic view of the ride itself. So see, they can even put a sign on it. They got flags down it. It's a great look, and then you turn right here, and there's your entrance. Nice little understated entrance. Not a whole lot going on with it, but it's cutely themed and it has a little bit of gingerbread type detailing to it. And notice too, this is really all you see, is there's very little of the coaster that you can actually visibly see. So we don't necessarily want to go that whole way on ours, but we'll do something similar. Okay, so let's go back. And I use Google Earth a lot for these sorts of things. So I think what we might want to do instead is kind of do this sort of deal. And let's say we want if we do want our water here, we're going to want it 2 down. Because when we come back up with 1, then we're still above by 1 tile for our plaza and everything else. You don't want your water, almost never, pretty much 100%. You never want it like this, where water is the same height as the landscape around it. You can make the argument in a swamp or things like that, but even in a theme park setting of a swamp, you're still going to have that kind of water separation from your main path. You don't want to flood out your park if you have a little rainstorm. So not necessarily a good day when that happens. So we know that this is our water level here, which is going to be at 45. So that means that we want to be at, say, 50 for our turnaround. Let's turn this off. So I think we can go almost right into it, and let's that banking is looking a little suspect. Okay, let's do this. I wasn't quite wanting to go straight into it that way, but what I am going to do is just kind of underbank that corner a little bit there. Give it one more. Just one more. There we go. That way it fits in a little bit nicer. I changed my mind about the one more once I was looking at the diagonal. Like we said when we were building the lift hill, those diagonals stretch things out, and sometimes you don't want that look. Okay. Let's see if we can make it to that 105 level, because I'm not sure we will. Not quite. So there's a couple things we can do here. We can play with the friction of the coaster, just in general, if we want. So we've got our, what is this, wooden coaster 2. So we're at 540 mass. We can change if we want to. I'm not super inclined to change it. I think we can play with it how it is. Upward curve is not a bad idea, Zara. I was trying to avoid curves a little bit if I could. But that may not be the bad idea as far as this goes. Trying to think about how this is going to come together, because I think if we want to do the Holiday World thing and have this over top of the not that paint. We want to have this over top of the water. I think it is. I don't use the landscape. And all this landscape we lower, we're going to smooth ourselves eventually. A little bit tedious, but definitely works. So what Zara's saying is we could come up with an upward curve this way, or you could do an upward curve kind of in the other direction. I'm thinking you give that a try and see how it paces. Hey Mav, welcome in. How are you? We're building Raven, or sort of kind of Raven. We're just building a CCI, more so. So we're a little fast through there, but not, unreasonably so. Enough that I'm willing to kind of send it. Okay. Now we're going to go right beside this one here. The annoyance of going this close is that you start eating into the supports for this one. So we're not going to do too much with this, but we are going to do a little bit and then kind of stay above our future tunnel here. I bet you can. That's a good thought. You know, it's been so long since I've built a wooden coaster like this in the game that I forgot that you can do that. So Zara Thusher here has reminded me that we can fix those support issues by rearranging how these sit in the tile inspector. So there we are. You are right. Tile inspector comes in clutch here for the win. So let's continue along. We're very out and back right now. Kind of what I want to do is get up to this point and then kind of drop it into a little valley over here. And I realized that I literally just said about 10 minutes ago, don't build landscape below where your water is. Our water's over here. I think we can have a valley over here, just a little one. We'll call this sort of a man-made lake on the front side here. So we're going to take a look at that because we are running out of some speed, so we don't want to go too far before we need to do something there. The other thing that we can do, and actually we might what? Not a bad idea to have a crossover, like you say. What I'm thinking right now is the tunnel isn't going to do anything for anybody off ride. So why don't we put this other coaster in the other return section in front of it, and I'm going to add some flat bits here because that's what CCI would tend to do. Get to the right width here. We want a little bit of path interaction, but we don't want to totally or go overboard with it, where the whole thing is doing a lot of path interaction. I mean, that's fine. Say we could do that, but I'm kind of thinking we put our tunnel behind, and then we have a nice little section of funny hills here. Good airtime. A lot of CC, a lot of stuff to fix there. Oh, we got a pretty decent size, or pretty decent movement here still on the train. I didn't catch the speed, but we'll catch it here this time. And then my thought is we get this. Well, welcome in, a person named Hente. Thank you for coming in, and I'm glad you enjoyed the videos. Okay, so let's see how low we are there. We're at 30. So that, okay. 30 is not awful. Actually, that's probably maybe a little bit big, but we're approaching sort of a little bit of unrealism here, but let's take a look at our speed. We have 30 coming through here. 30. Okay. We're going to do this instead. So we'll come through there and do our bits, and then we're just going to do like a double down into a valley down here. And that way we're at our low point. So we're at 50. So we'll call this our low point at 40. Say. And now we're going to do a little bit as far as turns go. Now this whole valley will kind of roll out from here, and then we'll kind of take essentially our entire landscape in this direction now. And it flows out from here. Because what we don't want to do is create basically a trench that looks very forced here. So we want this to be a little bit of a natural-ish chasm. Going along this way. And this will be sort of a cool surprise for people on the coaster, is that you don't necessarily see this. All you do is you see your coaster kind of cruising through here, getting some good bunny hops, Then you turn under the lift hill, and then it's just gone. It's gone into the hills, and you just don't really know what's going on with it until it's back to the station. I think that could be a pretty cool option there. But we do need to wrap it up because we're going to be having some trouble getting back up to 70, I think. Not too much, but we're already at 30 here, and we know that we're at 30, again, 30 there. So we can't spend too long down here, or else we're going to run into some trouble. So you'll notice that I'm not using any inclined banked corners at all, or any inclined unbanked corners either. Somewhat on purpose. I'm trying to do more of the simplistic kind of thing, and then we'll change it up a little bit. Oh, and thank you for the follow, by the way. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Is there a concern that the track is lower than the water at the nearby lake? Not super, because what we're going to do is a little bit of water management here at some point. Once again, this can kind of go well off the rails as far as realism goes, depending on how deeply you want to think about this. But I'm going to think about it like this. So, and this is like I said, this is getting into the weeds, so this is too much for your kind of thought process on a park. Totally get it. Don't feel the need to go this far. But I kind of think of this as a sort of natural lake, but it's raised up a little bit. But it becomes the sort of main drainage point for the park proper around it. Because we're going to build up some hills on the other side, and we're going to build some other stuff around there. But a lot of our runoff from the park itself is going to go into this lake. So typically, a lake has inflow points from wherever, whether that's a natural inflow or something from like a drain pipe, and then it also has an outflow. And if you're doing a pond here for specifically engineered retention and water outflow, we can say, okay, there's a certain amount of volume that this pond is going to hold, and then once it's at a certain height, and at a certain height you call it a weir. There's a structure called a weir that you can basically raise or lower to let go a certain amount of water. And we would say, okay, there's going to be a weir somewhere around here that once it gets to a certain point is going to release water to a pipe that goes somewhere else, whether that's fully off our property somewhere else. But I think what we're going to say is there will be another kind of river or lake or canal or something down here that all gets released to. That's down in elevation from the main lake. What we could also do from a realism standpoint, if we think that this is going to be a concern, is you could put kind of stormwater type structures down here, pumps and things like that, as an option as well. But what we'll do basically to counteract the fact that this lake is higher is we're going to have another one down here that's lower. So let's say this section of the park flows into this guy, and all of this landscape down here flows into, we'll call it like a river down here. That might be kind of a nice way to border our park. I'm also realizing that I built this further over than I thought I was going to. Kind of thought I was over here somewhere, but that's okay. We can make that work. It's not going to be a very big park in this instance, but I kind of was looking at this wooden coaster as sort of the border of our park on this side, but it may not be. We'll see. But honestly, we might have coaster 2 here, coaster 3 here, perhaps something like that. Okay, so let's work on finishing this up, and honestly, what we might do is just finish this in such a way that it's just kind of up and in. Let's see what that looks like speed-wise. Ooh, it's very slow, but not totally awful. Let's see. I'm not married to the fact that this has to be a fully straight brake run. We can put a section on the diagonal if we want. That would be okay. So we could theoretically extend this out and just run it straight back. I kind of don't want to go straight back because I want a couple of turns in here at least, but this is a good start. We could also turn it out the other way. Let me just build here real quick without much concern for what we're doing. We're off by 2 on that side, but I'm mostly curious to see how bad it's going to be from a speed standpoint. Let's just want to see where that comes out. Not bad, actually. I don't necessarily want that aggressive of a return to the station. This could be one of the very few instances where we do use a hill such as this to get us back in, but it's not a requirement. We'll get ourselves out of the hole in that way. How much higher does that get us? It gets us to 80, which is a little much. Don't want to go down too far. And we still want to make sure we have enough brake run space. Let's see how this looks. See how it looks not banked first. The other option, and kind of what I'm thinking of also, is turning this brake run, giving a diagonal, turning it again, and then giving us a couple more hills here. That may not be a bad idea. Okay, so that's an option that works. Not necessarily the best, but give it a try by doing that other option. Okay, we're a little too close. I'm not going to only do a couple of pieces here. I want to at least say 3 to 4 pieces there. I would ideally like to be able to come up into the brake run on a 45 rather than a 90-degree angle, just because I think it ends up looking a little bit cleaner. So we could always try our build backwards approach. Or turn off on clearance, or back on clearances, just to make sure we don't do something like that. The other option is we don't necessarily have to do this essentially 90 degree plus another 45 here, so we don't need to do that sort of corner because we already did it right here. So there's, not to say we have to do the same thing. We can kind of come through and do this. Always. The challenge that I have about this sort of thing, though, is that I don't feel like you take full advantage of that nice big drop that you just created. So we made this nice size drop specifically to have this kind of great speed into the valley. So let's use the speed a little bit rather than coming right back to a right back up again. All right, one more idea. And as we've said many, many times, do not worry about creating too many renditions of your rides. Spend however long you need to get the coaster correct. You want to be happy with it when you're done. All right, Marcel, enjoy your stream. See you later on. Thank you for coming by. Let's take a pause from that here for a minute and let's just kind of think about what else we're doing here. We're going to go for the all dark brown approach. We're going to look at a couple of different color options potentially, but let's smooth out our landscaping just a little bit here. Keep this height throughout. We're going to use our invisible scenery blocker to get rid of just a little bit more of the support structure here, just to add a little bit of height. We'll put a cross beam in there at a later time. Kind of do the same thing for this one as well. We can leave that down for now. Same thing for this guy. Okay. So by putting this ride in here, we basically said that, and copying Raven, so we're going to go ahead and lift that date, which is 1995, to say that, okay, this area, this coaster was built in 1995, so a lot of what's going around here can kind of reflect that. So we're talking kind of early 90s, perhaps, some of the development here as we kind of work our way around and kind of looking at what's coming next. Now we start to scale this a little bit more. This 4 height with this kind of small plaza right here is going to end up looking awfully large when we put a station building on it. We're up to this height for at least the base, plus at minimum 2 height. Really, it's going to be 3. Then you put a roof on it, so we're talking 5 high there. So the whole thing, and we can step that building down a little bit just to help get it a little bit in scale, but still it looks awfully large, doesn't it? Especially when you're surrounded with this kind of plaza here. So let's go a little bit, let's try and raise this up just a little bit. Not by much, but let's start with 1. don't think it needs to be any more than one. So now what we are left with, so we do one or two, we could do two, is you have your plaza space here and then a little bit of incline up to Q station, whatever. If you want to make this more almost foreboding, you raise it one more, bring that Q up, so then you're going to stand here at the bottom and look up through 1, 2 land change elevations up to this station. That's an option. I don't necessarily know if it's the right option, but you know, I'm a fan of landscape modification, so let's give it a try. Because what I also like about that is that we drop down so far here at the beginning that this section is going to drop a little bit into our valley too, and will make it look less like this is all some base elevation that we were building to initially. Um, you want to try and make your landscape look like it was natural, and so that's why we're here, as we want to make a natural looking landscape. Keep in mind though, as we're doing throughout, nothing touches the ground. So none of these coasters are on the ground as far as track goes. Really, your older wooden coasters, you might have that, but you're not going to have it anywhere else. So don't do it. Okay. I'd really love to finish this coaster. I'm just having a lot of trouble trying to get something that I like for the ending. Which that can be a, not necessarily a curse, but a difficulty of a CCI coaster at times, trying to get a something that works well. We could try and wrap our way back up to here. We could say this may be the play. Let's take a look. We're at 65 now. We get back under that. Oh for 2. There we go. Turn off the paint tool and see that we are not in good shape there. Oop. But that's not to say that we can't just do some other things here. Let's turn back on our clearance checks. 55. So this is an option. I don't quite like the S bend here, so we're going to do what we can to edit that out. Ideally, we go up and over the one here, but I think that's going to be well too slow. It is. Let's see one thing real quick. Let's say we go to 80 up here. Get a little bit of a pause on the layout. this may work for us. And they were already at 70, so this could work depending on how this pacing goes. Let's take a look. I'm okay with a little bit of a pause. I just don't want to have it to be too slow. And it's not. So I'll have that nice drop there at the end. 45 is just slightly smaller, which is fine. We can deal with that. Fine. All right. I don't necessarily want to give up the elevation that I've created here on the other side of the lift hill. I kind of want to go back up again. Let's get ourselves back so that this is one off. Okay. We could bank this one. I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't. I'm going to put this in a tunnel and kind of create this interesting little bounce back to home. All right. That may be a retaining wall there. We'll see what we do. Bring some of these bits down. Okay, so actually I kind of like that layout. It's a little more compact, I suppose, than the other stuff. Probably don't need this long of a brake run also, but that's a CPI thing. More brake run, more straight track than you think we would need. Here, what we can do is put 2 flat here just to make that tunnel look a little more level. Cool. Okay. Let's do this. Not seem to want to be drawing sports. Interesting. As the track is below the surface. There we go. All right. So there is our coaster. The entrance and the exit. All right, so we're going to make the decision to go to 2 trains to start. We don't necessarily have to. So Raven, for example, opened with a single train. Later on, they came back and they added the second train. So it was 1 train to begin with, but it had this sort of suspiciously straight section of track after the station, which later on they did come back and add in a second train. And if you look at a number of CCI coasters out there, there are a number of them that do this, that are clearly set up that if the park wanted to, later on they could add a second train pretty much without any issue, which I think is a clever idea for just overall design. We're going to go ahead and put this in. If you were doing a timeline park where you kind of update the park over year by year, that would be a really cool, clever addition that I think would surprise a lot of people. So that's one option that you could consider. Okay. Now, one thing we need to think about too is maintenance. So we have our transfer track that's going to go right here. Plus, we just got rid of it all. Our transfer track goes here. But what about our maintenance area? We're gonna say that this is the start of a back of house maintenance area on this side. So we can say, okay, the um, access to this area is here, and then we may have some sheds and some other things, and then it'll go connect up with the park over here. You don't need a fully separated maintenance area throughout the entire space, but you want to think about one and think about how different maintenance activities and just park operations activities are going to get to certain areas in your park when you build them. So we're going to consider that kind of as we build through our space, um, and consider the overall use of all these different areas. So let's think about that for sure. This we'll call our maintenance area here. We're going to screen that with some pretty heavy trees, and what that allows us to do is also create sort of a reveal of this coaster. So if we put a clump of trees, let's use our ground green tile here. We put a clump of trees around this side. Then, as people are coming in on this kind of front section here, you're not going to see this coaster until you're basically up on it on this side. So you won't see that station until later, and then you'll see the lift hill kind of out in front of you, which I think is a cool look. Welcome to our new followers. Welcome Fire Ice 421, and welcome one of these mics. Thank you guys for the follows. All right, so our coaster is done. Taking name suggestions for anyone who wants. We don't have a theme for this right now. I kind of think of this as sort of generic New England type, Midwest type amusement park in the U.S. So we can certainly pick a couple of different options if we'd like. But I think we're running pretty well. Woody Snick. Woody McWoodface. Thanks, Arceus. Alright. The Woody Snick I kind of like. We're just gonna call it Snick for now because we'll name it something here at some point. But this is the working title is that. All right. So color wise, a lot of PTC coasters for whatever reason have orange lap bars, so we're gonna go ahead with that. Usually the wood is we'll go with either brown or we'll go with the light brown, and then 2 trains, 2 colors. We'll stick with that. And everybody coming in today, welcome. So welcome, Celine McAwesome. Welcome, Chilling with You. The Downfall of Troy, I kind of like also. That's a good one. 2 colors for the train. So I'll take my first 2 color suggestions I see in chat for our train colors here. And all right, pink. Downfall of Troy. And or Snick, I guess, in pink. What's our other one? You show the turnaround again. Again, actually. That pink, the next color we'll do for the other one. All right, so we have right-hand turn up top, left, right, nearly 270 there, left, right, and then the entire end is right-hand turn. It is not quite my favorite, but I think we're okay in this instance. Not totally awful, but red and yellow. So we're gonna go with Soap already got there with pink as one suggestion. So for train number 2, go with yellow. Yellow, I said. There we go. And then tan, and then orange. Just from a realism coloration standpoint, your lap bar and your seat colors are gonna be the same between trains. Those don't really vary between or on one coaster. Oh, and also welcome in Flavloco for following as well. You all coming from Marcel's channel, or where are you guys coming from? Welcome in, everyone. All right, so let's continue to look at our station queue and all of those fun layouts here next. Okay, so we've got our station here. I said earlier that 3 by however long the station is sort of your minimum length of a station. So let's think about this a little further and think about how we're going to do this. So we want an exit path through the space, but we want to make sure that we can kind of fit everything that we need. So let's get rid of the huts for a second just to give us some space here. If we go up to our station element, welcome Mike Von Tuki to the channel. All right, so let's say that we're gonna stay alongside, but we'll start to drop down here. More profitable, the guests can't leave. That's true until they run out of money, and then you're just SOL and you get a bunch of angry guests, and we don't want the angry guests. So we can kind of drop down over here, and let's decide how we want to pull this off. We could go over. Problem once you go over is that you're way over top, and especially with the 2 height drop here, we're a little far from the side. So let's not do that. Let's cut down a section here in the middle. And what we'll probably do is build a retaining wall on one side, and then we can just kind of have a natural sloped landscape on the other side. I think that'll look quite nice. Okay. I'm doing a little bit of, well, I'll call it finish landscaping, even though it's not finish. It's just smoothing. We'll call that our retaining wall. Actually, we can go one more. Here. Okay. The minimum height clearance here, the 2 heights, is not something I usually like to go by with, but I think it's going to be okay in this instance because it's an exit path. It's not like it's a constantly traversed pathway. We'll stick with it like this. And then we will go outwards just slightly here to drop in. Once again, I'm building pretty much all of my landscape by hand. Not to say you got to do that, but I think it looks nicer when you do. Okay. So, what we can do if we want now is build a little gift shop here. And let's go ahead and start to identify our general markings here. A lot of times when I do markings kind of throughout the space, I'm going to use the red sand as my pathway. I'm going to use the red grid as the buildings. I'm going to use green grid as any sort of landscaping type stuff. And then purple ends up kind of being rides and, so on. Ice, obviously, for the water. Just gives us some ability to offer some differentiation, so we kind of know what we're looking for. So our main pathway here is going to be right alongside this gift shop, and then we'll have our queue that sort of grows up from the side here. Let's look at this side on this section just to smooth this out a little bit so we can see kind of where the backside of our queue is going to be. The backside of water. All right. All right. So we will smooth a little bit of this. We're not going to smooth the whole thing. It doesn't have to be fully smooth. I like to leave kind of these little 2 triangle sections kind of up sometimes, and just kind of leave it like that. But we don't have to, and I'm not doing too extreme of landscape, because what we want to do is sort of build up to the 1 or 2 sections worth of extreme landscaping. So those are going to be sort of here and on the other side there, and then the rest of this will be kind of smooth, pretty chill throughout the whole area. We're not talking aggressive mountains on this side, but we're not ruling it out, because a good landscape feature can really make or break a section. Okay, we'll go a little bit steep here. We want to make sure that we have a little bit of space on either side before we build our station, so we're not building a station that's right alongside a big landscape drop off. Okay. There, there, there. Okay. Now, because we are only 1 here, we cannot go across just yet. So I'm going to smooth this out a little bit and do that. So we're basically doing the minimum clearances that we can to still get supports here. Now, at the moment, I'm not planning to go back and do footers. You can, and we might in the future, perhaps. But today, at least on today's stream, I'm not going to do footers for the ride. Okay, so we'll put the exit here. We're going to turn it and then put it here, because that way the guests will pop out kind of the side, then go out and then down. So it at least looks a little more natural, perhaps. On this entrance side, you generally want a little bit more space. We're going to give 2 sections worth. Yeah, so footers are just painful especially on wooden coasters. It just takes a very, very long time, and you got to be pretty dedicated to it. And I honestly don't think most people care enough to really have it look fabulous. Certainly no problems if you do want to do that, but it's not really for me. So anyway, let's decide how we want to do our station here. So we'll have our air gates along here. Our dispatch, or our main operator panel will probably be back in this side, and then we'll have secondary operator panel here on the front. This station and this park will be small enough that it would probably be a 2 operator minimum, 3 operator maximum situation, where you have 1 operator in the main operator panel and then 2 checking restraints. But we'll see how that goes. Off to a driving lesson. Well, enjoy, drive safely, and I will talk to you later. Thanks for stopping by. We can enter from a couple of different spots on the station. We can kind of enter straight on the front, or we can kind of wrap ourselves around. I kind of want to enter from the front side here, which let's use some Q. We can change this out a little bit later. Then we'll turn in right there. I very rarely like to use 2 slopes in a row for pathways. So I always try and break it up, or if we are going larger, break it up with a landing every little bit. So you've got, say, 1, 2, then 1, 1, 2, then 1. It takes up a lot more space, especially if you have a larger or a larger route to travel, but it also is going to look way better in the end. So would recommend that you go that direction. Okay, and then we'll cut this here. Okay. You rotate an entrance, pull up the tile inspector, select your tile with the exit on it. Since we have the exit selected, even though it's called entrance, it'll be highlighted here in white. Use the rotation button here to turn. And then we're going to go over here and take our pathway. Not do that. I'm going to do that. Connect it up. So there is our coaster, which we will test again. Okay, so queue line now, or there's a little bit of a pet peeve between a friend and I about saying queue line, because essentially you're saying line line. Queue itself means line already, so you don't need to say line after you say queue. So it is really just a queue, not a queue line, and yet I still find myself saying that over and over. Okay, we've got a 2 levels here worth of plaza space, and I'm feeling like our lake is going to push a little bit closer, maybe, just to give us a little bit more space. Let's go through here and level this out. We want this to be right down against the landscape, but not too close. Okay. And then I think this will be kind of a nice backdrop to raise this land up a little bit more on this side as well. Just to give it some nice landscape views, and then you can kind of think down here from the pathway side, this would look really nice with sort of a treed backdrop throughout here. When we start thinking tunnel for this diagonal path, we are going to consider a couple of different options, but probably the first one we're going to consider is a wooden roller coaster as an option. There's a couple of things we can kind of think about with it, but we'll kind of start here. We could put a car ride on there. Well, actually, no, we can't because they can't go diagonal. All right. We're going to get into naming as well. So, from a cleanliness standpoint, whenever I name stuff, if it's not a ride or attraction that is actually operating in my park, I'm going to call it Z backslash and then a whatever the name is. I like to name everything so that I at least have a descriptor and it's just clean. You'll notice as we go through this whole series that I like cleanliness in my builds. So I'm going to call that Z backslash because when we pull up the rides list, then it's going to be here at the very bottom, and I think that'll work all right. We do have all these other coasters here from our thumbnail image, and then I have a couple of little shops and stalls here. So these poor people have entered this park to enjoy a pizza, a map stall, and a bathroom. I hope the map stall is not showing them the coaster that they can't get to, because if it is, that's a shame. And sorry. But anyway, let's consider what goes in here a little bit. Let's also consider our thing here. Oh, the puke didn't work. Oh, hang on. Let me give me 1 second, and I will save this and then turn that on. I don't think it's turned on right now. Also good if you have open RCT, turn on autosave just in case. If you don't, then I would recommend you you do save very often. All right, let's reload this, see if that works or if I have to reload the game. Okay. So let me run run that real quick and see if it's working. There we go. So this is a stream plugin that Ali414 made that lets you do various things to the park. So there's a description kind of in the bottom of the channel there, and then you can also redeem the points for that. So just some kind of fun interaction. I haven't turned that on for a while, so thank you for redeeming that to get me to this point. Okay, let's see here. So I think we're at the point where we're ready to kind of move to some of the next stuff. We're gonna do our transfer track here, and then some other things. All right. So we have our nice little wooden coaster here operating well. Let's go ahead and add in our transfer track here. I'm actually going to do this with the same track here, just so I save a ride. We don't necessarily need to do this. We could use a separate ride, but we're just going to set it up like this. Okay, so we'll take 1 out and 2 out. We're going to put a brake run here in the various areas. We're going to copy that same thing over here. So it's important to consider how your transfer track operates if you're interested in realism, which is the whole point of this whole thing. So the idea here is that this is where the spare train sits. This is our main course track. When it's time for the spare train to be put onto the transfer track, this whole thing, both of these tracks will slide over and will then have the transfer track in place in the main line. Train dispatches, goes down here, stops on these brakes, and then the whole 2 things slide over. So what does that mean for us? That means that we need to have all 3 of these tiles here clear spanned. So we can't put a wall on the tile right here. So we can't do this unless this whole wall is going with us when we move, which it might. Might do that, but I don't think we are in this instance. So we want to make sure that this whole thing is a kind of clear span. And honestly, these are done pretty easily. So we're gonna just go ahead and do a 3x5 simple structure at some point. Hey, welcome in, Mulder. How are you today? Yeah, it is a little strange to do the transfer track after the planter or the station. Why I said planter, but it is not uncommon, especially with early CCIs. That's kind of a thing. Okay. The other thing that I'd like to do is set up some lights on the lift hill and just some kind of other little details and things like that. Oh, hey, Andrew. Welcome. Welcome. How are you today? Let's go ahead and add in, we're not necessarily playing this for the game mechanics, but it would be kind of nice to do a photo building later with the gift shop, wouldn't it? So we're going to go ahead and put in a photo kiosk, or a photo piece of track. Then we're going to just immediately hide it because that is an ugly looking thing. And we're going to come over here, build backwards, and drop that in place. So now no one is the wiser that we have a photo track piece, but we will still be able to sell photos on our ride. The other option, by the way, is you can build the photo thing just like down somewhere underground, and I think it still works, which is interesting. We lost the exit hut here when we did the modifications. If you have a rotated entry hut, either entrance or exit, it will disappear when you do modifications to the ride. So just be aware of that, especially once we go in here and hide our entrances. They're still there, they're just hidden. So if you do modifications, they will still go away. So you'll have to unhide them and redo it. Now, as far as transfer tracks go, you can put a static train on here, for the for the realism, for the looks. But keep in mind that you want to only make sure that you're doing the transfer tracks per the amount of trains you've got. So we can run 2 trains on this coaster, no more. So either you have 1 train running and 1 train on the transfer track, or 2 trains running and none on the transfer track. Don't put a third one on there because that just doesn't make sense. So that's your kind of key lesson, I suppose, as far as that goes. We'll drop down this backside and actually put a little lean-to perhaps on this side. And actually we'll drop this side as well, because then we can take off the train on the backside. So let's look at this a little bit from a maintenance perspective. We're going to go ahead and put in some asphalt here for the maintenance team. This is really all pathway, but at this point I tend to do it in themed pathway. I really don't use the general guest pathway terribly often. We're going to take this one out soon probably and do some scenic instead. But I'll start with this and then we'll come back over top with invisible pathway if we want to move it around and do some other things like that. Okay, so we'll lower this whole section here. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn this into the red sand. The only reason I do this is because I think it looks cleaner. So anywhere that I lower my space to put pathway, I just put the red sand underneath of it. It also helps when you pull up the map later, is it calls out very nicely where your pathway is versus not. So something to think about. Notice too, we're very slowly coming through here into the brakes, so we may adjust those here a little bit later, perhaps. Okay. So I like this, the wooden wall here from MK98. So I might look to use this guy. I kind of like the look of that in white almost. It fits nicely, perhaps. There's really no need for windows or things like that back here, so we don't need to look at that. But we do need to look at dressing it up just a little bit. Now this is a little different than I usually do. I don't typically build scenery sort of sight unseen as this would be, but we're gonna do this initially, and then we'll look at some different options. But a lot of times I take quite a bit longer to build these sorts of things. We'll do some bracketing over top of the ride entry and exit into the space. And that's a little bit low, so we might end up raising it up one. While it be a little low for clearance standpoint, we'll bring it up just a little bit. Okay. And we've got the metal standing seam metal roof, which is a pretty common roof. Let's go ahead to, before we get too far, let's change our palette because we're still using the standard in-game palette, which is nothing wrong with that, but I do like the English palette 2. Where are we here? English palette 2. This is sort of my preferred palette, I would say. Although, note that we gotta change up our color here. We lost our pink, so we'll stick with, we'll go back to red and yellow. Whoever suggested that initially, so loses out, unfortunately. But we'll stick with that. English palette 2 I like. Oops. I like English palette 2 because it has a pretty good cross of colors that fit a realistic type palette. So you got a lot of browns, you've got a lot of reds and things like that that can be used for construction materials and for landscape in general. It's called the English palette because the original park that was used for it was called Uh, oh boy, it's three English towns, uh, Durham, something, and Gnarlsboro. I think anybody who's here from New Element can probably find it more more quickly. But it was a head-to-head park for head-to-head eight, and it was essentially the debut of that palette, and it ended up being really kind of a popular one and was one of my favorite ones. But the theme of the park was basically three little English towns, um, and that was that was how it became the English palette. Okay. One of the big things with this is that I don't necessarily want this sort of dark or this gray color because when you try and build realism, you end up getting yourself sometimes into a situation where you have um, very drab colors, browns, grays, and just too many of those. And yes, a lot of theme parks are pretty brown and whatever else, but we are also playing a game. There it is. Thanks, Andrew. Uh, so I got Durham, Gnarlsboro. All right, do too. Thanks. He's on tracks as well as the co MVPs there. So typically DKS is how we refer to that park. So um, DKS is the easier way to call it. Okay, so let's these out. There is a piece here to fill in that little corner bracket section that I will add later on. Quite there yet. What I am onto though is wanting to add a number of polls. Yeah, for me, English palette 2 is definitely the default. I have liked this palette from the start, and it kind of remains one of my favorites for the whole thing. Um, Actually, give this a little bit of rock, perhaps, on the bottom. Depending on where we are, I kind of feel like we're in sort of a wooded, um, forested type area. So we'll call it that, and use that as sort of the springboard for our foundation itself. And then we don't necessarily have to do anything more there, but I don't think it would look bad if we went through and did something like this. Hey, Alex, welcome in. How are you? Thanks for stopping by. How is your day? A nice Halloween. Yeah, I haven't done too many Sundays here for streaming, but the I had some conflict yesterday. I ended up being busy pretty much the entirety of the day, so I had to move it. I'm still gonna have to end early today for trick or treating, but I kind of like Sundays, to be honest, and I might look to do, say, a shorter stream on Saturdays and then another stream on Sundays, perhaps, or kind of just move it all to Sunday. So something to consider anyway. Um, we'll see. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. We are building a little mini park, and we're trying to do some more infrastructure and stuff. So I don't quite know how far we're going to make, but we started out with a wooden coaster, CCI type coaster. The basis for this one was Raven at Holiday World. So we're talking a lot of underbanking, a lot or no banking really. Um, some terrain, not a whole lot of terrain, but some, and some water elements. So we're jumping over the water right here. Couple crossovers. So we have that sort of out and back vibe, but we also break away for some of these bits and pieces. And then this final dive down into some valley that's getting built here, and then we'll have a tunnel on this section here up to the end. One comment on tunnels too. While there are parks out there while there are parks out there that do have underground tunnels that are like concrete lined or whatever else that have the coaster going through it, rarely do parks do that. Only because they're typically really expensive. Going underground is not cheap. So most of the tunnels that you're going to see us build here are more so like. Above ground that are just going to have some kind of a structure to it. So that's the philosophy there. Okay. Yeah, I think the low turnarounds are working pretty all right. It helps to sort of I help accentuate our landscape, I think, or I guess the opposite way is the landscape accentuates the coaster. Cross with this. Okay. We're not going too heavy as far as theming and look and everything go on these because A, this is a small park that is probably not going to have a theming budget for one, and B, it's a maintenance building. Let's say back of house is what you use for the term for basically anything that's behind the scenes. But I think we can go ahead and go through and do the do this. And the question is, do we want to go forward with having these posts stick up through the roof or not? Got the corrugated roof pieces here, which we can kind of set those so that they don't interfere, but have that nice woodsy feel to it. I don't know. I don't necessarily mind that. We can go back later and adjust these as well. So we're moving the pieces in Tile Inspector to get the ordering right, just so we don't glitch through. Again, I got to put in those corner pieces here at some point too. Sorry for that brief disconnection there. Welcome back. Would not be a stream if we don't have connection issues. Okay. Let's turn it this way so we can kind of see what we're doing as far as adjusting these. Do a couple more of these. I don't necessarily plan to do a ton of buildings and architecture in this stream, but I do want to do some. Challenge being that this sort of like custom scenery is a very slow process and a very long process, so it's not the most exciting thing to watch. and especially not for me because I build really slowly anyways. But it is a part of it, so I do want to show a little bit here and there. And if there's interest, we can keep on doing more of this kind of thing. If there's not, we can certainly focus on the things that are there. Okay, so let's look at a door for down here. Have some access underneath. And then I also want to go ahead and put a I'm doing a little bit of work on the inside here, so not that we're going to use a ton of cutaway view for anything here, but here we go. We're going to go ahead and essentially put in our rails for the transfer track to slide on. And we're not going to carry it the whole way through because it doesn't necessarily matter. Nobody's going to see those, but we want to at least get a little bit of something in here at a time. And then a little floor. You'll be able to see this just a little bit when you view this from the outside. So we can kind of sort of see it, and I want to at least make sure that it's reasonably visible. Next thing we're going to come through and do is a fence dividing the maintenance area and the regular coaster. The reason I do that is so that I can have construction or maintenance guys, I suppose, working on a coaster in the transfer track without having to worry about getting hit by the train on the tracks. Oh, also, welcome, Zara Thax. I had not seen your follow there. Thank you for the follow. Okay. Couple more bits and pieces. For whatever reason, this one seems to be poking. The wooden coaster is poking through the wood walls there. It doesn't seem like the track actually makes a bit of difference. Well, this direction it looks good. Anyway, what we will do though is wall up that side so we don't see it there. We're going to leave this backside open, and what we're also going to do is build a what we call a davit arm. Back here. We'll build that out. Add some structural bits to that. We can't go in that direction, so we'll go in a sideways direction. Okay, so a davit arm essentially is a crane that is out here to lift up a car or whatever else it may be into our space. So this would extend kind of into the bay a little bit and be able to, you could strap a wooden car on it, slide it out off the edge here, position a truck underneath, and then lower that car down onto a flatbed and then drive it off for whether it's annual maintenance, whether it's sending it off to be replaced, whatever that may be. That's what we have that for. So something to think about when, especially where you put your transfer tracks, is how do you get to those locations. So that's one of the things that we're going to think through as well. Now I'm also going to build a wooden fence here in front of the coaster just to give us some room here. And you could do a couple of different kinds of fences, and also the fencing standard is going to depend on what kind of park you're doing. If you have a park in, say, Southeast Asia, it's a small park, you might not have any fences, or in Russia, or other areas that just don't have the safety standards of the US or Europe or, Japan or some of those as far as fencing goes. If you're building a corporate park like a Disney or Universal or a SeaWorld, you're going to have very specific fencing standards, like an 8 foot high fence in any location that's right next to the coaster. So you want to think through what that's going to look like, but you do want to make sure that your rides are fenced in some form or another. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so we have that, and now we also want to make sure that our space here is a little bit grungy because it's no maintenance area is spotless for one, and no back of house is going to be terribly clean as far as this all goes. So what we can do, I don't know how much this will jump out. That's oh, I was gonna say let's try and recolor some sections of the roof, but um, that ends up sticking out way more than just a slightly off color look. So we'll leave that as it is. Mm, Not if we want to do any kind of detailing up top, but this is on the center of the tile, so there's really nothing for us to do there. Okay. So the next steps that we can go through is our chain. Um, and essentially, every wooden coaster is going to have the chain lift hill, goes up, wraps around, comes on back down, goes into some kind of a motor house, and then gets sent back to the beginning of the ride. So we want to build something in here that fits that really well. Hey Ethan, this is inspired by Raven at Holiday World, so a CCI wooden coaster. Okay, so let's give us a little bit of room here to play with. We can adjust that a little later also if we want. I think the only reason we can't go do this one is because we're going to glitch the heck through it, so fine. These motor rooms do not need to be large. In fact, they probably only need to be about the size of the thing itself. So it could be just a 1x1 little hut like this, and put in a door. Used to this work. Then we'll color some ground here. And send that up to station somewhere. We're also going to give that just a little bit of a gap so then we can have maintenance access through there. We will come back with some beams here in just a little bit to add some more detailing there as well. Anyway, next up is that chain return. So the chain starts here. The motor room starts here. So what happens? We go through with one of these guys in the right colors, generally black and black. and go put that here. That will run to the station itself, or the base of the chain, and then we're going to take this and move that down below so we bring back our track. And we have one more. Okay. Now we can talk about the chain return itself, which we're going to use the mini suspended coaster for. Now the question is, how far down does our chain lift go? So if we go right here, does this make sense? Yeah, it kind of does, because we haven't actually done this properly yet. So let's close this. Let's put the chain lift here. Got it. What we probably want to do is actually put this on the half tile down just one more, which I'll do in just a second. Let's reopen this, but need to make our entrance and exit visible. Put this back. Rotate it again. This is kind of why I don't like using rotated entrances, because it takes forever to do that sort of thing. Every time you got to reset it. No entrance. Okay. Not open test. We'll bring some peeps up this way later. All right, let's go into our cheat and we'll checkbox the forbidden allow track building at invalid heights. Which I've said before, we'll say again, I don't recommend you keep this on in typical building, because I guarantee you will accidentally build something in the wrong direction. Okay. There we go, much better. And as an added bonus, it now goes into the side of the building, which is more or less how it ought to go. Okay. Let's delete this. All this like that. And we're going to call this z / chain return. Actually, be a little more specific. We'll call this the wooden chain return. Okay. So first off, then we'll go back through here and adjust these. In some instances, these are going to come through and glitch a little bit. And actually, we can probably take off the chain lift portion. I gotta do it again, but it might just be a little bit cleaner without it. Yeah, you can start on kind of either location. So you can start on the kind of first incline or on the bottom here. However you want to do it. Typically go from the bottom, but it's not to say that you can't do it either way. They are both perfectly valid. We'll decide here in a minute if we like this. We like this ride sort of glitching through here. Okay, there's our chain return. We can decide later if we end up keeping that or if it's a little too much. The black is probably the good color for it. You can certainly make it a different one or a kind of darker gray. But you can kind of do however you want to go about it. All right, so let's put some trim pieces on this. And you notice I'm playing zoomed in. I'm using the OpenGL. Um, I've just found I like it zoomed in a little bit more. Um, Helps with some of the details, but at some point then it becomes a little too heavy on the details, and it's a little easier to go heavy on something that nobody's actually going to see. All right, so signage wise, we want full of signs. I don't have the 1K posted sign. Oh, we do. We have that one. Take this one and some others. If you're new to custom scenery, it can be a little bit daunting in the fact that it's often a little difficult to um, know what scenery is out there for one, and really just decide where you're going to choose from. So it's the best thing you can do is go look at parks and enjoy other custom scenery parks out there, see what other people have done, and see what works best for you. If you find scenery that you like, then great. If you don't really know what's out there, then just start with a good workbench, like Extreme's workbench here that we're using, and just use that. If you then find other scenery you want to add into it, then go ahead and add. But it's a good way to start kind of finding what's out there and kind of learning what your options are to work with. Okay. So we're gonna do a little bit more landscape modification here. Okay. We've got this retaining wall over here that we haven't quite decided what we wanted to do with yet. A couple different options we can use. Excuse me. Some scenery type pieces. We could use something like this, which may be our best option. You get a little bit of this kind of jagged edge, but stair-stepped edge to it, but that's honestly part of a retaining wall anyways, typically. All right, and then on the transition here, we're going to use some stairs. We've got the wood stairs here, and then the stone stairs here to work with. These stairs, the steep stairs here, you can they're not my favorite, so you won't really see me using them. They end up being a little too steep, in my opinion. I think you really need to stick with the overall look of the stairs and not go too heavy and too steep too quickly. I just wanted to see if we could get that to stop glitching there, but that's okay. I mentioned earlier that I was going to replace these paths. I might actually leave these for now, but what I will do is go back underneath and mark this sand. Hey Zara, welcome back. And mark that sand only because we're kind of working through a lot of these bits and pieces. We are coaster one still, and honestly, we might spend our whole time here, just depending on how infrastructure goes. This is taking its time for sure. What we do want to add back on that staircase is a handrail. New format is a little slower moving, I suppose, than the old one is, but I honestly think that's probably okay. We can put a handrail on both sides if we want. One of the things we need to pay attention to, because we made the decision for putting stairs right here, is where do our ADA guests get to? Do we do a? We're not going to do a slope up the queue because it works for getting in, but once you get off, you're not going to backtrack through the entirety of the queue. So what we'll probably end up doing is building a uh, little elevator here or here, one of those spots, and kind of getting up that way. Or we could replace these bottom sections here with a ramp and then go from there. Which actually we might do that. That would be the better option. Let's do that. So, of course, we just finished this theming, but we'll take it out. I'm also going to make this one. We're going to use. I know there are more shallow sloped pieces that you can use for roads. So that's a good option potentially. We have the shallow roofs also, which, to be honest, that may be something we go back and replace on the maintenance bay, just to make that a slightly better looking building, perhaps. We got the whole set here from Extreme. That may be the way we go there. But in the meantime, go ahead and do that. All right, so now we have a ramp up to the location here, and then we'll just pull to the side right here. Then this will be our elevator. We can make a working elevator if we want to. I'm not sure we want to, but we can. Oh, there's a dog. Got a lot to say. Alright. We can kind of do that, and then it moves our path this way, but we need to remember to put a sign there if we do. So I guess for now, we'll not. Okay. So we're making some progress here. Not too bad. I said earlier that I wanted to put some lights on the lift hill. And so we can go ahead and do that if we want. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to start here with a pathway. And so we can kind of go through with a visible path, and then let's make sure this is at the right height that we want it. Yeah, that seems fine. And then you can look at these and decide what we want to do with it, as far as, do you want it on one side, do you want it on two sides, what do we want to go with, by just playing with our connection points there. I kind of want it on one side, I think. I wouldn't mind doing flags, but I don't really have a good flag object in the game to work with, so I think we'll stick with this. And we'll do these every two. Every two too much? I don't think it is. Okay. Let's select that footpath. We'll just, the way that we're selecting these is basically selecting what's connected for that path, which allows us to pull off the lights. Now, talking custom supports, are we going to do any? The answer right now is no, but the potential option is there if we want to go that direction. So we can come back and look at that potentially. But for right now, we're going to go back through and place a couple of cross beams. No, I'm using CSO. I just don't want to fill my space with another CSO piece. More than anything, really. Not to say that, yeah, we couldn't go that way. There's plenty of custom scenery options for those. Okay. We're using number 2. And then we'll spin this around. Do number 2 here. Thing is, this beam would typically be straight, but since we are kind of working our way around this corner in RCT, it's going to come across this way. Yes, this is the Extreme 2021. This is the spot where if we did do some potential custom scenery options, we would potentially start here and just build up a couple of little sections, but I don't think we will. We can look at the, oops, that one. We have the small one already. Find that. And we can use the larger one here. Would have guessed it would have been in this one, but I'd be wrong. There it is. So it stands out just a little bit, but not too bad. You could, as Zara suggests, do the half diagonal if you enjoy pain and suffering. We may do some half diagonals in this park, but probably not because I'm not very versed in them. So we'll potentially leave that off because that sounds awful. Half diagonals are sort of the new trend, I should say. Used pretty heavily in head-to-head 8 or head-to-head 9. Jeez. I'm not quite on board with the IP, but only because I haven't played around with them enough to really know what I'm doing with any kind of semblance of confidence. So one of these days we'll give it a shot, but today is not that day. It's true. It's not that hard to replace a straight and a diagonal, but what is more difficult is trying to get the rest of the supports around it to look okay. So that's what we're avoiding at this point. Okay. Could go ahead and lower a section here so we can put some water in. Now this section will probably warrant us going back through and doing some rework as far as custom supports go. Because what we will want to do is a little bit more. We want to do a little bit more concrete footers here, get them out of the water, and then kind of build a structure over top of this. So that may be something for next time, perhaps. Just a little bit of additional work there. We can start thinking about landscape also if we want to. Be our next consideration. We'll go ahead and replace this with, oh, not that. These. What texture is this? Has that texture. This one, that one. Okay. Okay, so we'll connect those for the minute. You'll notice that that piece glitches through. That is until we drop anything down on this tile. So we'll just wait on that for a minute. The landscaping wise, we've got the golden hinoke, which we can stack up here and give ourselves a little bit of thick coverage along the maintenance side. I don't know if we want to go with that tree mix just yet. Probably need to think about that a little longer, is what kind of mix we go. I think we're pretty established that this park is a US based park with a sort of forested mountainous type terrain. So what we probably need to think about is, what that foliage mix is going to look like. So a little bit darker, perhaps, and definitely mixed. Oh, welcome in, Ryan, 1993. I'm sorry I missed your follow. Thank you very much for following the channel. One thing that we can go back through with is some more of our fencing, because we want to make sure that we're fenced throughout. Actually, that one's probably okay on that side. Here, going up underneath, I want to do something like that. Or actually, just so we can avoid this being a little awkward here, we can go around it that way. Rid of that. There we go. So this can be our photo building / gift shop / whatever else we want to make of it. We will have to determine an architectural style for the next one. I may end up doing that off stream because I feel like that's going to be a long and painful process, as architecture typically is with me. So I don't think that's anything that anybody wants to watch. Let's continue with a couple of these court members. I'm using this one because it hangs down just slightly from the wood beam, and it's a little more obvious what's going on. We can come back to, we can't do this on the diagonal. You can come back to with a piece like this, and then spin it around and put this on the outside, and then it looks like an L-beam or an L-bracket, which is probably a little more accurate. The only challenge, like I said, you can't do that in the diagonal, so we can't do it here or here. So a little disappointing as far as that goes. All right, so let's roll through these little sections here. I think this is our last crossover. Oh, down here. We can't use this method here. You do the top one, you make it look like an I-beam. And you're really just doing this over every place where the track crosses. And the reason we do that is because it's spanning a longer distance between bents than you would otherwise. A bent is the vertical portion here, kind of works its way down the track. So we're trying to avoid the structural instability there. So it's purely a visual thing, but it helps us realistically explain those gaps. Okay, so we're making pretty good progress, I think. It feels like we're in good shape. Let's decide how we want some of these paths to go. I feel like this is probably pretty accurate here as far as distance from the coaster and the space there. We may want to stick one more in just to give us a little bit more room here. And now we can leave ourselves a small gap there as like a flower bed perhaps, or something. Then come back in. We're going to, a couple different options we can do. We can do something like this where it's like a concrete type, like exposed aggregate type look of a pathway. It is called mulch, and I think it's kind of supposed to give that general vibe. We could also go with a colorable concrete here, like this called dirt path, but it can be whatever it wants to be. If you go for the classic approach, we can do the cobblestone, the crazy path, as an option as well. I kind of like the mulch path here. Definitely not mulch in our world as far as this goes, but it could be kind of a nice look, essentially. I see this as a very, we'll call it classic amusement park feel. So it kind of has that overall feel to it. Okay, so the coaster itself is here. We don't really need to bring the bring ourselves right up to it. Like, there's no real reason for bringing a pathway right up to the base of the coaster itself. So I think what that means is that we can use this area here for a flat ride. Now, from a flat ride options, we have up to, we'll call it a 5x5 space here. We don't want anything with a tower because that's just going to kind of get in the way. So we want something that's a little bit smaller. I'd almost say excuse me, like a monster ride may be a decent option, which is a 4x4 ride if we do the shoestringed hacked version of it. What else we have? I don't think we want to do bumper cars because that would be more of a midway thing. A carousel has a big roof structure, and so we don't want to use that to block everything. We're definitely not looking at track rides at this point. Balloon ride could be a good option. Teacups could be a good option, although typically you cover those. Chair swing, we will do a shoestring version of that and kind of cover that across. And Enterprise is also an option. Blocks the ride every cycle, but that could be a good option. But let's stick with a and we'll call it the um, monster type flat ride, and we'll go ahead and I don't want to eat up too much space, but we'll put it there because there's going to be a fair bit of landscape here still. Um, so let's get a little more specific in terms of our landscape here, or pathway. This is not a large park, so there's not a real reason for us to do any kind of real heavy pathway work. We don't want to go too heavily covered on here. I say that by adding a ton of path right here, but what we'll go through is we'll break up this kind of secondary area. And this will be sort of a main path here, secondary path, sort of a midway, some kind. Maybe our carousel does kind of sit somewhere over here along the water. Don't know quite yet. Get there in due time. And then we'll have some kind of waterfront, whether dining or whatever that may want to be. We have our nice kind of walkway midway here. The big thing that we're looking at here is let's look at this midway. So you draw a line straight up this pathway here, and you get this coaster right at the end. So that's what we're shooting for, is some kind of a midway that's going to end in a great coaster like that. Here, want to find the one tree that I typically use. What it's called. Add in some later. We do want the depot bush tree. That's useful. And we'll probably bring in some of those fruit trees later because we can color those. There's a lot of different options here once you get into the custom scenery space. as far as trees, and especially the 2x2 or 2x2 or 2x1 size trees. Now, the larger the tree, or larger tree options are really kind of give you a lot of variety that you can use. A lot to consider here. I can pop open another park and add this to it later, just so I don't spend this entire time looking. It's a tree that Che made. Hang on. Was it honey locust? I think. Here we go. So this is one of my favorite large trees because it's large enough that you actually get a little bit of overhang. I think this would look quite nice if we have a, call it, I'm not going to fully set it up right now, but just some kind of a nice little pathway here. Call that like a seating wall. And we're on the diagonal, but we might be able to bury some. We might be able to bury a couple of benches in there as well, just so some guests use it. But we'll kind of work on that as far as the setting. This tree is a little bit bright as far as the overall look goes. There's a darker version that we can go with as well, as far as coloration goes, but you can kind of see the color options, which are somewhat limited, which is why I kind of like using this version here. I feel like a midway needs to be brick, especially a classic midway U.S. theme park. I feel like you're using a lot of brick, you're using a lot of like wrought iron, things like that. We'll definitely call that our entry to this zone. Not necessarily a themed area, although it's not to say that we couldn't come back with some themed areas, but I kind of look at this almost like a like Lagoon Park in Utah, where we're really seeing more just general themes, um, no real heavy theming of one particular type, or if there is theming, it's on a specific individual ride and not the overall area. So that kind of gives you the freedom to do a lot of different things with it. Um, so Q for this ride, we want to consider where our exit is, where our entrance is. You really don't want to end up throwing somebody where your queue entrance is, say, over here, and then your exit is over here. You also want to make sure that it makes sense. So you don't want a queue entrance for a ride across the pathway. Like I could put the queue over here and then do some kind of bridges and tunnels and other stuff to kind of wrap it around and have this sort of cool adventurous queue, and then get over here because you really don't want to enter the queue of the ride facing away from the ride. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a how you would traverse the space sort of thing. So in this instance, we're going to say we'll start on this side. And if we wanted to, we could go across and do a bunch of things now with it, but we want to start somewhere that makes sense, and this is what's going to make sense. So what I'm thinking is we have some kind of an entrance here. And we said by putting it up on the hill that you're going to kind of create this foreboding thing. It may not be foreboding as a bad thing, but this is your kind of new plaza space right here. And there's your entrance to the coaster. We come along, and then the kind of short version is that we're going to connect up right here. And potentially the long version of this queue continues to wrap around and does something else. It might do this. Of course, done in a much classier, non-standard queue way, but always kind of want to try it out first with the things that are easy to put down before you get into something that's a little more challenging. But this is kind of nice how it sort of builds its way up. We'll do some sort of entry icon here. We'll do a height stick. We'll do whatever else that may be. I don't really see this park as one that's going to do lockers for something like this. It kind of seems like a leave the articles in the bin on the station sort of thing. If you were doing a Universal park, for example, you'd have a pretty big locker area. If you were doing a Cedar Fair park, you'd probably have a decent size little locker area here. In some cases, for Six Flags type parks, you might even have a enter through the locker area, like you would on a number of coasters at the Six Flags parks. So that's something to consider as you build through the different areas. Lastly, we can, if we want, take a, depending on how this sets up. So let's say we have, this coming across and, I'll start like this and I want to put something right there because that's our center viewing spot down the way. So that may be some tree planters and things there. We've got our one flat ride that we're thinking about here. We've also got the carousel here on the corner. Now we will do some kind of a little fancier carousel building, perhaps. And we'll probably do a custom carousel just because it seems like the thing to do. And decide how we want to situate that for our whole space. Okay, connect that up. Where is our entrance? Our entrance is all the way over here. I'm debating going ahead and hooking up our park just so we can have the guest kind of ride stuff. I want to see how the lateral G's affected this. Very high, medium. Positive G's 3.10. Negative G's negative 1.3, which is pretty substantial. Wow, that's some ejector airtime right there. 1.35 lateral, so not that bad on laterals, to be honest. We're kind of in decent shape as far as that goes, but not bad. Now we don't need to keep this as standard queue looking. I guess it doesn't need to be a cattle pen. It can be other things depending on how we want to do it, or if you want to do a if you want to hack the thing to, that's interesting. I want to connect that. If you want to do custom scenery here, so make this whole thing invisible and then come back through and do some scenic on it, so that may be an option as well, potentially. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit more landscaping. We're kind of approaching the end of today just because I've got trick or treat to get ready for. But that said, we want to do a little bit more landscaping here, just get this looking kind of nice. And note that we kind of only got through coaster number 1 today. I think the intention was initially to build all the coasters and then sort of do more infrastructure related, but it didn't quite work out that way. So we're kind of left with just one coaster. Although on the plus side, that means that we can revisit this next time, which I might actually do next week rather than waiting 2 weeks on a shorter stream. It becomes a lot more doable to do it every weekend. For those who are here, is Sunday a viable streaming day? Would you prefer Saturdays, since that's our usual typical day, or is this better for you, worse for you? I'm curious to just think about schedule a little bit, how that works. I'm trying not to make this too steep of a slope. I really don't want to get in that far. Trying to make sure that we still have some space underneath the coaster here. This area we're going to have to adjust some more. Not a bad thing, it's just something we'll have to recommend we get into, maybe not next time, but there's some tedium parts of coaster building and, well, just landscape building and park building in general that probably not worth streaming. But I think what I will do for next time is get ourselves a tree palette perhaps, and some different landscape options that are going to work for us. Then we can figure that out. All right, you're more often home on Sunday. That sounds good. I know for those who like to watch Marcel, he's streaming around the same time. Which actually, we may go raid him if we still have some folks here at the end. Wrap up. So let's think about our overall park at the moment. So we don't have a very big park so far. This is it. But what are we doing? We've kind of developed out that we've got some kind of a lake here. We've already developed out that we've got some kind of a mountainous range on the backside, some valley on this side. And what we've done with this wooden coaster is effectively cut off this entire section from additional park. Like, I really don't see an obvious way to expand to this side. I don't want to wrap around the backside here because we've got our maintenance area and everything like that. So we don't really want to touch it too hard. We might be able to adjust a little bit. What I kind of see more than anything here is the more that I look at this, the more I see a park entrance. And we're going to do this all in red, but I see a park entrance kind of here, coming in right there. I see a Ferris wheel or something right here. See our midway going up in that side, and then maybe some kind of expanded space here, and then maybe our second coaster actually goes right up here towards the front, like right in this space. And what that second coaster is doesn't necessarily mean it's got to come after this guy, but we probably want it to be a similar era to this guy. Generally, your coasters that are older are going to be towards the front of the park, just because the park will have expanded kind of outwards. So you want to just think about how parks expand. So in all likelihood, you're going to have your older rides here at the front, and then the newer stuff towards the back or towards the outskirts. So you think about kind of how those all expand over time. Six Flags Over Georgia is a good example of that, where we have the train loop, and some of the older coasters are right in the center of the park, like their mine train, but really everything else after that is outside the park loop. things that came later, so outside that train loop. Speaking of a train loop, though, I kind of feel like putting a miniature train in here. Um, these seem like a good option for us for I don't know, for a nice scenic transport ride option. The question ends up becoming how you route it through some of these areas. Do we want to go off into the woods over here and kind of have this as a scenic ride through the woods, or do we want it to be more scenic ride through the park itself? I kind of look at our park entrance as where you would put that to start, which means that we would probably come along the water's edge here and then wrap around. And actually, what we might do, now that we think through this a little more, is we might move this here, and then perhaps our train ends up coming with the uh, midway path here, and then your train is going to kind of hit along the water's edge and go in that direction, or we could come across and go in this way, cross our path, and then kind of wrap around the backside here behind this ride, and go around. So a couple things to consider as far as that goes. Maybe this doesn't sit here at all. But you want to put in the rides that are going to have the biggest impact on your overall plan first, and once you get through those, you can decide if you want to do smaller things like flat rides or whatever else that's going to build out your park but isn't going to be a deal breaker necessarily. So you'd probably say, okay, we can scatter in a bunch of these flat rides, but um, we want to make sure that we don't put in all the flat rides and then try and do a monorail or a train or whatever and say, okay, well, shoot, now we can't fit it in because all these things are in the way. So the way that I kind of look at a train ride is that that has to happen first. There's very few train rides out there that I think you could fit in afterwards, and I don't think you really ever see a park built like a modern, fully established park that says, "Oh, we're going to add a train ride for the next season, and we're going to build in this whole new space through the area." That's done early. It's one of those kind of opening day attractions. So we want to consider where that's going to go and how it's going to go before we really fit it in. So what we may consider here is this as our train station. As you come into the park and kind of set this on axis, have a nice architectural train station here. What we could also do, and what we might consider doing too, is bring this in a little higher up. So you're basically looking over top of the train station, and then you go into this valley, and the architecture of the train station and everything else reveals itself. And then over to the side here, we could have our Ferris wheel that's kind of perched up on a hill and can see different things. So this side may have may have that as an option. So we're too high here. That could be a good option here as we play around with elevation a little bit more. Um, One thing that I will say that I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with is I don't think a train ride should change elevation. Or if it does, it's minimal. It's like one or two here and there, and honestly, I would hide those in the tunnel because I don't like the look of a train ride, especially scenario type train rides like you would see in the original, kind of doing this sort of thing, and going around like that. It's just it looks odd for one when they're slow going up the hill. It's not really realistic because you're not going to get a train doing that sort of an incline. I wish we had this sort of level incline or whatever else, but that could be something to consider. But yeah, so if we do a Ferris wheel, say up on the hillside here, then your pathway comes down, wraps across, or again, or we go like this. Well, that's weird. How did I make two of them? Like to, and maybe the pathway then. Whoop. Neat. Maybe your pathway comes across here. We're looking over the lake, we cross over this way, and then we're high enough that the train can cross underneath of us. We bridge over the train, and then that lets us go over to this side to do some other things over here. So I'm kind of thinking entrance on this side, Ferris wheel, maybe that first coaster is still up top here, clustered in the corner. And what kind of coaster is that? That might be a corkscrew coaster. We could do almost a standard corkscrew layout, like a double cork, and that's it. We could do a loop and cork. We could do a. I want to do a custom ride more so because I just think a custom ride is going to look better anyway, and it's just more fun. So I might do a mine train. That's what I had here initially. For mine train, the problem is for mine trains they take up a lot of space. You can do a more modern mine train like say Roadrunner Express at Six Flags Fiesta, or even a different manufacturer like an Intamin or something like that. But I feel like this kind of a park is more of a classic Arrow type park, so we might if we go that way think about a mine train option. It doesn't have to be mine themed necessarily, but it could be a good consideration. But that said, I think there's more to consider for next time. All right, so I think this is about the time when we go ahead and wrap up because we're approaching that time. So what I would like to do is kind of wrap up here, and then we're gonna make this into a series. So we already have our Andrelczyk Amusement Academy series, but this will be sort of a potential mini series within that, where we kind of build a park as we go along. So if this was enjoyable, or at least interesting enough compared to the other style of Andrelczyk Amusement Academy we've been doing, let me know, because I think we could turn this into something and just kind of go through park making in general. And then I'll do a little bit of stuff off stream and just to keep us moving, and then a little bit on stream. So thank you, Zara. I appreciate the feedback. So hopefully it was okay. If you are not following me on YouTube, check out the link below to go follow me there, which is where I post all the archives of these streams, plus any park reviews and all sorts of things. In honor of Halloween today, we did a park review of Fright Nights by Fatage from 17 years ago. So it's a pretty old park, held up pretty well. And it's kind of neat to look through. So that came up earlier today on the channel. So go check that out if you're interested. Thanks, Joseph 27819 for the follow here, and for checking all that out. Let me see if Marcel is still going, which he is. So we're gonna go raid Marcel today, and check out his stream. So he is kind of the polar opposite of how I build, but has a lot of really cool insights and just mechanics of what's going on. So we're going to go over and check him out. As always, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.